Hello, everybody. My name is Graham Elwood. Welcome to The Political Vigilante. Great way to support the show is submit articles like Eric Huso did at patreon.com/Graham Elwood. You can submit articles. You can get bonus content for as little as $5 an hour, and you're supporting independent media, not the corporate jackasses on cable TV. So there was this report. The U.S. military could collapse within 20 years due to climate change, report commissioned by the Pentagon says. The report says a combination of global starvation, war, disease, drought, and fragile power grid could have a cascading, devastating effects. This is pretty serious here because of who authored this report. A new U.S. Army report. Americans could face a horrifically grim future from climate change involving blackouts, disease, thirst, starvation, and war. The senior U.S. government officials who wrote the report are from several key agencies, including the Army, Defense Intelligence Agency, and NASA. Well, I mean, come on. These are a bunch of hippie long hairs. All these organizations are a bunch of tree-hugging, no-good hippies. So can we really believe it? I make that joke because the conservatives who are like, there's no climate change. Well, the military, the Pentagon is worried about it. If the Pentagon is worried about it, you should be worried about it. The Pentagon isn't going around going, climate change isn't real. No. Oil companies did internal investigations in the 70s. ExxonMobil, to be specific, in 1977 did an internal investigation, and they found, oh man, fossil fuels, the burning of fossil fuels is causing climate collapse. Our product is causing this. And they buried the reports and then paid for fake reports to say, oh, there's no such thing as climate change. Back then they called it global warming or whatever, right? Who commissioned the report, though? Probably some hippie that Obama put in there, right? It's commissioned by General Mark Milley, Trump's new chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Again, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, not a lot of Sierra Club vegans is my guess over there at the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Trump's guy commissioned the report. So let's get into what it says. The two most prominent scenarios in the report focus on the risk of a collapse of the power grid within the next 20 years and the danger of disease epidemics. I'll go into it and we'll break it down. This is a direct quote. Increased energy requirements triggered by new weather patterns like extended periods of heat, drought, and cold could eventually overwhelm an already fragile system. So in the South, prolonged, southern part of the U.S., prolonged periods of heat, more mosquitoes, more ticks, carrying all the West Nile. All of a sudden, all these diseases start spreading that we haven't had to worry about, right? Weather patterns. I mean, just look at, and one of the things so remember Katrina, Hurricane Katrina, and I believe it was 2005. Remember what that did? That wasn't just New Orleans. The impact zone was 90,000 square miles. It was the size of Kansas. It was a Category 5 when it hit. By the time it made its way into land, it was downgrading to like a Cat 3, which is still a massive hurricane. Millions of people a bunch of people came to Houston. I mean, like I had friends who lived in Houston, and all these people came from the Gulf, and it caused problems in the community because what do you do with all those people? We're going to get into that. They started doing research around the planet of populations that are at sea level because they're looking at this. I've done a report. I've done videos here. If you go to NOAA, NOAA.gov, they have a simulator. You type in the year, it'll show the coastlines and how much flooding is going to be there in 20 years. They just know it by 2040. What are you going to do with that? Where are 20 million Floridians going to go if Florida's underwater? Where are they going to go? They're going to come inland. Imagine if you live in Ohio, Iowa, and there's not a lot of people there, or you live in, like, let's say, South Dakota, which has a population of like a couple million people for the whole state. What if 5 million people moved there all at once? The infrastructure, the schools, the roads, the hospitals, what are you going to do with this? Where's the food going to come from? Because of the flooding we just had this past spring in the middle of the United States, only 58% of the crops were planted. So we're 42% less crops just got harvested. That's going to cause a food shortage. So they will look to places also like Bangladesh. The report went all over the planet. The permanent displacement on a large portion of the population of Bangladesh would be a regional catastrophe with the potential to increase global instability, the report warns. Because Bangladesh is almost all at sea level. Millions of people live there. Millions of people live on this little island called Manhattan. What if that island's flooded and they have to evacuate it permanently? What are we going to do? Where are they going to go? This is a potential result in climate change complications in just one country. Globally, over 600 million people live at sea level. 600 million people. This report, it's a very extensive one, and the link is in the show notes. It looked at what they call a Syrian-style refugee crisis, because I've talked about this before on the show. There was the Syrian civil war wasn't created by climate change, but it was exacerbated. So they had years of drought in the Syrian countryside, in the rural areas. So there was not a lot of jobs because there was drought. There was no farming jobs. So all these people moved into the big cities. So when the civil war started, it was exacerbated by all these people who there wasn't work for them and all this other stuff. What are you going to do? We saw this in the 1930s. We saw the Dust Bowl displace millions of Americans. People were just homeless. They had no more jobs. Soup lines, bread lines, all that stuff. Every year the hurricanes are worse than the year before. Think about the fires we just had in California that were exacerbated by PG&E. They haven't put money into the power grid. We've talked about this. We have an old power grid. A Green New Deal fixes this. A Green New Deal updates the power grid. A Green New Deal plans for this. Gets ahead of it. The rapidly melting Arctic, where the report recommends the U.S. military should take advantage of this hydrocarbon resources and new transit routes to repeal Russian encroachment. This is the problem with this report. It talks about climate change. It doesn't deny it. It says it's happening. But the military psyche on this says, oh, well, we need more troops. We need to be ready for war. It doesn't say, why are we burning fuel? But let me just show this graph, this chart basically that was in. So essential services interconnected by power grid outage, right? So let's say the power goes out around most of the country, right? Oil and gas, communications are dependent upon power. Transportation, government services, banking, power plant, power supply, fuel supply, switching office, right? Banking doesn't have checking, Federal Reserve, government services, transportation goes down. Think about this, perishable foods are out. The whole country loses its power for 2-3 weeks. All this food goes to waste. Everything you got in your freezer and my freezer, you can eat it for a day or two and then you can't eat it. It's no good. All perishable food's gone in a matter of days. Hospital, ambulance, fire station, emergency call center, communications, pensions, service payments, Treasury Department, legislative offices, military installations. It's all interconnected. Shut down. They talk about in this report that the United States military won't be able to survive all this. Water scarcity is also a driver of possible global food system failure, which could trigger new outbreaks of civil conflict and social unrest. Again, let's go back to this. The military spread too thin, or they're all out over the world. What are we going to do? What's going to happen? After 2-3 days of no power, no electricity, no services, and it's just all fend for yourself? The other thing too about our military, and I've traveled with our military. I've gone to the Middle East. I've seen war zones. I've seen how the United States Army, what it needs. Water is 30 to 40% of the cost required to sustain a U.S. military force operating aboard. I remember that. In the Middle East, these pallets of bottled water everywhere. Pallets and pallets and pallets of bottled water that has to be shipped in. What if there's not as much water? Where does that water, what do we do? Your military spread all over the world and it can't get water and food, and what are you going to do? There's a gaping hole, though, in this report. I'm glad this report came out in the sense that it shows any climate deniers. This is the report you send to climate deniers. The Pentagon is worried about this. Oh, it's just a bunch of... this isn't Big Green. But Greta, Big Green funds the military report. Yeah. Sorry, Granny Petrol. But the gaping hole in this report is it doesn't say, so, therefore, because of all of these disaster scenarios, we should get off of Middle Eastern oil and we should have a Green New Deal and to stave off this from happening. If we put everybody to work fixing the problem rather than just let it collapse, part of a Green New Deal would be a new power grid that's smart, that uses green energy, that's all built here in America, and we would share that all over the world. Spending the money. Hey, Bangladesh, Florida, you got to get out. We got to bring you inland. We have to we have to plan for that. So there's going to be some places we're going to lose. We have to plan for that. Maybe there's geoengineering. Maybe we can help reverse the climate change. That video I did about algae, they figured out a way for algae to pull CO2s out of the air at 400 times the rate of trees. Imagine if we put money behind that on a mass scale. What does the military want to do? Describes the need for massive permanent military infrastructure on U.S. soil to stave off climate collapse, but portends new foreign interventions due to climate change. All right, military. No, the solution, this is like, we have a drug problem in America. Oh, more prisons. No, let's get to the problem. From a militarily strategic standpoint, just for that standpoint for a second, the military should be like, let's get off of Middle Eastern oil. Let's find ways, no more plastics. Let's find ways to clean the water. Let's do all of these things because we can't function without it. Not Liz, and I don't mean Liz Warren's green up the military for our stability readiness or whatever. Bombing the Middle East with vegetable oil is the answer. That's not what I'm talking about. We got to get out of Middle Eastern oil. Get rid of all these problems. There's no more pirates in the shipping lanes. There's none of this stuff. A Green New Deal and being like, we're off of Middle Eastern oil. We're off of oil across the board, wherever it comes from. America, the Middle East, Russia, it doesn't matter. No, we're off of oil by 2030. In 10 years, we're off of oil. That'll help fix it. This is what this article needs to say. America's chronic dependence on oil and gas driving the destabilization of the planet's ecosystems. This is why we need a Green New Deal. This is why Bernie Sanders has the most comprehensive Green New Deal when he revamped it in the summer that I've seen. Tulsi Gabbard wrote the OFF Act. I give her credit for that. That's why a Bernie Tulsi ticket is the best chance we've got. It is the best chance we've got. Otherwise, it's, a permanent military to stave off food riots? Awesome. That'll fix it. That'll fix the problem. So it's just like, we're going to have food and water riots, so we just need a military to just, you know, keep people in line. Why don't we address these issues so we don't have to have riots? Why don't we fix the power grid so it doesn't go out? Why don't we use green energy? So let's update the power grid. The power grid is also severely hackable by cyber terrorism. So let's take a lot from this report. It's a good thing, ultimately, but then the solution is not more bases in American soil and make America more of a police state. The answer is get off of oil, get green energy, spend money on research and development. The solutions are already out there. We already know this. There's already plastics made from plants, which would put farmers to work. Instead of mass pipelines of oil and natural gas and fracking, which creates earthquakes and kills people and contaminates the water, how about an infrastructure of pipelines to redistribute water? The areas that are getting flooded, we drain the flooding and we spread it out to the areas that are getting the drought. Spend money on research, geoengineering, any number of solutions out there. Many of them are already there and in place. They just need money on a mass scale. So thank you, Eric Huso, for submitting this. You're a political vigilante and you're helping make Gotham great again. You, viewers, can help make Gotham great again by subscribing. Even if you've done it before, YouTube is unsubscribing people. Please hit the subscribe button, like these videos, comments in the comment section, share them out on your social media. The more people that get this message, the better. And then if you can do financial support, please go to patreon.com/Graham Elwood or Rokfin.com/Graham Elwood. That is a blockchain cryptocurrency platform. That'll stave off the Googles of the world. And then join us on the road. Ventura, California. Ron Placone and I are going to be there doing the Progressive Comedy Tour December 13th. December 14th, we're doing the Sycamore, the Dojo of Comedy in Hollywood, California, and a bunch of 2020 dates we've released. And join the Comedy Film Nerds final live show December 12th. All my tour dates are at GrahamElwood.com, my social media, everything, PayPal. I have a P.O. box. There's a million ways to support the shows. Thanks for watching, and listen to this on iTunes. The more likes and shares and subscribes on iTunes for the audio version of this is another great way to get the show out there. Thanks for watching and listening.